Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews, brought to you by the Sci-Fi-Christian.com. I'm Ben DeBono, and here with me today, longtime Sci-Fi Christian contributor, Dave Johnson.
Hello.
Hello.
How is everybody?
We are here to talk about Neal Stephenson's newest book. I don't think we can call it new anymore because it's been out for a couple years, but it's at least his newest.
Yeah.
REAMDE. I don't know how you've been pronouncing it.
Yeah, that's how I've been pronouncing it. Yeah.
It's close enough, I guess. So REAMDE, which is kind of a intentional misspelling of read me, which of course is famous, a technical term or whatever. And you and I literally just finished reading this. Even though we started at very different times, we figured out we were reading the same book at the same time. Both finished it within a week of each other, so we decided, oh, what the heck, let's do the review together. So here we are.
Yeah. I pulled a Matt Anderson and it took me 5 months to read this.
That's not a Matt Anderson. That's like way faster than a Matt Anderson. I was looking at his Goodreads the other day, and he's been reading The Stand for like 2.5 years. Which, granted, that's a long book, but I think he's about 100 pages into it. So who knows when that one will actually be finished.
And I wonder if he even remembers what happened at the beginning at this point.
Probably not. See, that's doubtful. That'll happen to him. Sometimes he'll start a book and then not come back to it for a year, and he has to start over because he doesn't actually remember what happened. But yeah. But you kind of have an excuse because you were listening to the audiobook, right?
Yeah. It's a long story, but at the time I was listening to it, I started it when my son had to go to the hospital, and then we had a baby, and then just one thing after another, and I was listening to it in the audiobook, and I couldn't really pull away. So 5 months later, I finished it.
Yeah. It's tough to find context when you're listening to an audiobook. I listen while I'm biking, but if I wasn't doing that, it would take me forever.
Yeah. I like to listen to it while I go for walks. And so pulling away for a walk when you have 2 babies is really hard.
Just leave them with the wife. That's what the wife's for, right? I hope my wife doesn't watch this.
My wife's going to probably dislike thumbs down.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get a bunch of hate comments from all the women out there. But yeah, and since it's Neal Stephenson, it's like a 500-hour audiobook or whatever. Yeah, what'd you say, 47 hours?
Yeah, I don't remember how long, because, I listened to it on my iPod, and I listened to it in chunks. I didn't put the whole book on there at once.
Okay.
And so I didn't know how long it was. And then I listened to it at 2x speed. Yeah. Because I listen to audiobooks at 2x speed.
Yeah, that just doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. To each their own.
Like especially if you listen to like the audiobooks of The Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
Dude, Boy Dotrice, he reads at like 1/4 speed.
Yeah.
So speeding up 2x is like a normal person talking.
No, but it's like you missed the whole Shakespearean performance thing he's got going on. So, because you told me that a long time ago, and I was like, I'm going to try that out. And I got through like 30 seconds. I was like, this is awful. But hey, if it works for you, at least it made the book be 5 months instead of 10 months. So we wouldn't be able to do the review together if it wasn't for that 2x. So I guess I'll be grateful for it for that reason. Now, you and I have broken the Matt Anderson rule of podcasting a little bit because we have actually talked about the book some. A little bit. Yeah, once we decided we were going to do the review together, we backed off a little bit. So I think we both know a little of what each other's impressions of it have been, or at least were up until towards the end. But now that we've finished, why don't you start off? What's your general take on the book? And I should mention before you answer, you and I are both big Neal Stephenson fans, me more recently than you, but we enjoy his stuff a lot. So this is a fan's perspective, both of us coming into this book with high expectations, I assume. What was your take on it, just at a high level?
I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I think maybe this will go into discussion later, but being a Neal Stephenson fan, there is certain context for his works that plays into how you rate this book, because other books are greater in some ways. But I really enjoyed it. I think that it's probably not his absolute best, or clearly not his absolute best, but it's up there with his better ones.
Okay.
His better books.
Where would you rank it in terms of some of the other ones you've read? Because you put Cryptonomicon on top, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Cryptonomicon is my favorite so far.
Okay.
And then I'd probably put this next, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, I would say so. And then probably Snow Crash.
Okay.
And then the other ones that I've read, like the Diamond Age, I didn't really enjoy. And I read the first book in the Baroque cycle, which is Quicksilver.
Yep.
And that, I mean, that is huge, huge. I mean, that is literally like 8 books.
Yeah.
And I read the first one, and he was really slow in that first book. And so I lost interest and didn't read. So maybe I should actually pick up that trilogy again.
Audiobook it, man. 2 times you knock that thing out in no time at all.
Yeah. So out of the books I've read so far, I think this is probably my second favorite. But there are a couple that I haven't read yet.
Really?
And
okay.
Anthem, I'm probably gonna. It's probably gonna be there with with Diamond Age.
Oh man, because I'm gonna put that one number 1. I
Okay.
loved Anathema. That book just blew me away.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand where somebody wouldn't like it. You know, for me, it had the whole liturgy, Catholic thing kind of going on. Obviously, they're not Catholic because they're in a parallel world. So I had that going for me, but I loved that book. I'd put that right up there with Cryptonomicon as my number 1, number 2. This is actually only the 4th Neal Stephenson book I've read, so dropping down Snow Crash, which I think is a flawed masterpiece. Really, really good. Classic book with some serious flaws. And then I would put this one right below that.
Okay.
Okay, so my general impression is that as I look back on this book, almost every single scene or sequence or part of it works, and works well. Almost.
Yeah.
There's that big chunk in the middle that I'm sure we'll talk about where that needed some editing. But almost everything works well individually, but taken as a whole, I don't think he tied it all together, especially thematically, as well as he could have. To give a comparison, when I finished Cryptonomicon, I put it down and I thought to myself, I didn't catch half of what he was trying to say, not because it wasn't written well, but because I'm not smart enough to get it, you know?
Yeah.
Here I had like the opposite take. I felt, after I finished this one, I didn't catch half of what he was trying to say, but in this time it was because it wasn't written well. As a whole. Individually, you know, the dialogue's good and the action's good and characters are good, but as a whole, I think there's a lot of ideas going on in this novel that he never really ties together.
Yeah.
So I'm going to rank it at the bottom of what he's written so far. And I just started Diamond Age, by the way, and I'm enjoying that. So we might have another Neal Stephenson disagreement like Anathema when that one's all said and done.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear your take on Diamond Age.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading that. The ending blew me away.
Okay.
Just because, not because of the way things wrapped up, but the idea that he brought at the very ending was incredible.
Okay.
And I thought, and I'm not going to go into details there, but when you get there, you'll tell me. So.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a conversation about it once I'm done. So, basic plot of REAMDE is we start out, we have this guy named Richard who is this multi-billionaire, millionaire, something like that, owner of a corporation that's made a wildly successful MMORPG. Kind of like World of Warcraft, but slightly different. Interestingly, this MMO is designed specifically with the intent of helping people make money off of gold farming. You know, he kind of has this whole embezzlement thing going on, which I found great. Because that whole concept of the fact that people can make money playing MMOs just fascinates me. I don't really enjoy MMOs that much, personally playing them, but I love like studying them and reading about them because there's all these real world tie-ins that just completely interest me. So we have that going on, and then we find out that a group of hackers in China have started this kind of virus thing that locks people's files until they deposit a certain amount of gold somewhere within the world of terrain. And so it's like, okay, that's where because the virus is called the REAMDE virus, so that's where the novel gets its title. And she's like, okay, this is normal Neal Stephenson. You know, we've got MMOs, we've got virtual world, we've got technology, we've got viruses, we've got real world tie-in with the whole gold farming thing. And then, and this is, you know, mild spoilers or whatever, for the first half of the book, but then about 250 pages into the novel, which it's an 1,100-page book, so, you know, we're still relatively close to the beginning, we take a really bizarre turn that I found really jarring away from the MMO stuff, and it becomes kind of a war on terror, Islamo-jihadist, thriller-type book. And although we come back to the MMO stuff eventually, that never really becomes the focus again. Especially the REAMDE virus. That never is the focus after that point. And in fact, once we launch into the Islamic terrorist stuff, there's like another 250 pages before we even get back to Richard, who up till that point has been our main character.
Yeah.
And that's where the book lost me a little bit. What did you think of that rather abrupt turn in genre and focus for the novel?
Yeah, I agree, and that's actually where I stopped at one point, and then later picked up.
Okay,
but,
stopped because life was busy, or stopped because you were kind of bugged by the book?
Well, a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think it was like I got busy, but because of the book, I wasn't like driven to read it as much.
You lack motivation to make it a priority.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was telling you about it, I remember texting you at one point saying, REAMDE is amazing.
Yeah.
I was at the part about the MMO.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, this book is incredible. And then it gets to that part, and I'm like, what happened?
Exactly. Because that first 250 pages is by far the best part of the book.
Yeah.
And I especially love the fact that we learned that there's these two authors working on the story for the MMO, and one of them is this old school fantasy writer who lives in a castle in Scotland, and he's an Oxford Don or Cambridge Don, I think, clearly written and modeled after Tolkien. Okay, clearly in that mold. And then the other one is this 500-pound guy who lives in a trailer in Nebraska, and clearly kind of and just pounds out material. He's got like this incredibly intensely fast ability to just pump out page after page after page, regardless of whether or not it's crap. And so we kind of see there's this whole literary criticism thing going on at that point in the novel, between old school Tolkien-esque fantasy and maybe new Forgotten Realms. We're just going to churn it out for the sake of churning it out fantasy. And that's so good, and it's so funny. It's just classic Stephenson at that part. So that was by far my favorite part of the novel.
Yeah, I agree. I will say that like when he does change gears and goes into the China and the terrorism plot, I did like a lot of what was going on, especially with the Koloff. I really liked his character and the motivation behind that character. I really liked Zula as well.
Yep.
But it did feel like it was almost two books in one, and then especially when after you leave that first 250 pages, Tulane doesn't come back at all. Like it's just like a setup for the plot. But that was the best part of the plot.
Exactly.
And so the rest of the book is all going to be about terrorism in China and getting Zula and that kind of stuff, which was fine, but he just barely makes mentions of things in Tulane every once in a while.
Yeah.
And, like the one scene I'm thinking about in which he actually goes back in there, you see Eggdog.
Yes.
which these are big spoilers as well. But Eggdod is like the supreme being of Tulane, and he's Richard Forthrath's character. It's Dodge, spelled backwards. Dodge is his nickname that's given to him by his family. So he's this godlike character, and then after that, you don't see him again either. There's barely a mention of it after that, and it's just like the whole book was supposed to be, apparently, in Stevenson's mind, just about that terrorism, China plot or whatever.
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts on this, but I want to get your opinion. Why is the MMO stuff even in there? Because it seems really sloppy to have it in there just at the beginning and then go away from it. And I think it is sloppy, but I do think there's a purpose behind it. I'm curious what you thought, if you came to any realizations about that as you finished the book.
The one thing I think that, first is the plot device. So you have to get the plot moving into that direction. So that the whole thing with Peter, selling information to someone to Russians or whatever had to happen, and that's how everything started. But I think the one key thing that I was thinking about is that Dodge is Eggdod, and I think that kind of ties into what my feelings are about the theme of the book later on. So if you didn't have that setup with Richard as Dodge being Eggdod, the character, and that I'm not sure if there would have been much of a thematic tie-in later on, but I don't really have strong opinions about. I don't really have a sufficient answer that gives a strong tie-in besides most of the plot.
Yeah. See, what I think he was trying to do, I think he was trying to draw a parallel between contemporary fantasy, especially in the form of MMOs, and the way that that's evolved. For example, we get this whole thing that's going on in the game where it used to be these two sides, good versus evil, and now there's this realignment along more vague, less, black and white lines happening in the game. And I think he's trying to draw, and maybe I'm trying to, I just really want it to work, so I'm trying to really look for something that isn't there. But I think what he's trying to do is draw a parallel between that and the way that the international scene has changed within the last 10 years post 9/11, in the sense that the whole good versus evil thing has kind of, what we had in the World War II generation, that's a very different type of looking at the world, looking at war, than what we have now post 9/11. And it's similar to the transition that's taking place between the two writers working in Tulane. So I think thematically that's the parallel he was going for. There's also some interesting moments, I don't know if you caught this, where when we do see Eggdod in the game, Richard eventually winds up logging out. He's abruptly logged out, I should say. And then Seamus's character escorts Eggdod within the game. Okay? Yeah. And then later on, at the climax with the big firefight, Richard is, spoiler, wounded. Not seriously, but briefly. And then Seamus actually winds up escorting him in real life. And I don't know what that means exactly, but it was like, that's kind of an interesting parallel. So I felt like there was a bunch of things like that where I do think that there's parallels. I think Stevenson's smart enough where they're intentional, but I don't know what they mean. I'm not quite sure what he was going for there.
Yeah. I did notice at the very end, especially when he was talking about Eggdod, because he was saying that Eggdod's bot was just going to wander Tulane and get to wherever Eggdod's home is.
Yeah.
And at that point, Richard was heading to Prohibition Creek, his home.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty cool. How they're both headed home. They're both wandering there, aimlessly.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting.
So I haven't picked up on that one, but that's another one where it's like, okay, that seems really intentional.
Yeah.
But what does it mean?
Yeah.
What's he trying to say there? And that's where I feel, contrasting it again to Cryptonomicon, I don't feel like I'm scratching my head because I'm not smart enough. I feel like I'm scratching my head because he didn't do a good enough job thematically showing or giving enough evidence for what that link might be.
Yeah.
But thematically, what are some of the stuff you saw in this book? Because it is still Stephenson. He is still smarter than all of us. Yeah. So there is something going on here. You know, he's not just trying to write Die Hard 6 or whatever. You know, there is intelligence in this book. So what did you think was going on thematically that struck you?
Well, first thing, I thought it was interesting how Stephenson cannot get away from currency. Like every book, he has to have something about currency. Yeah. So, of course, in this, he had that whole thing. And also, I think it's interesting that he wrote this before Diablo 3 came out. And Diablo 3, he's kind of thinking ahead of his time, because Diablo 3 has a market where you can actually sell things for money. Yes. You can make money legitimately on Diablo 3. It's different than the way he predicted, but it's along that same line where you can actually make a living if you wanted to, selling your stuff. Yeah. That was pretty interesting. But to me, what I loved about the book was how America it is.
It really is. It really is. That's kind of awesome.
And what I noticed is one thing that I think the theme is, I think it's a political theme. And I think one of the reasons why it wasn't overt was I think he was trying to make it subtle. Because a lot of political type messages come over, kind of browbeating, I'm Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Libertarian, etc. And so I think he was trying to not say that, but kind of subliminally tell a message about America and about, especially in this case, gun rights or guns. Yep. And because the opening scene is the Fourth Reich having a reunion, and they're shooting clays with shotguns.
Yeah, the Ryu, as it's... I love that. His terminology is so awesome and all the stuff he does.
And so in the book, he goes to great lengths describing guns. And you'll see guns in the majority of the book. And not like other books, especially like Cryptonomicon. Cryptonomicon had a lot of violence. I mean, it was in World War II. But I don't remember, maybe it's more fresh in your mind, but I don't remember him going especially into detail about the guns. And so this one had...
Yeah, he always goes into detail about everything to a certain level, but not nearly to the extent as he did in this book, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so, and then America was tied in. You had, a terrorist threat coming again, and he came on U.S. soil, and then he attacked Richard's home, and then ultimately, again, this is another spoiler, but Richard killed the head terrorist with a revolver, which is a very American gun. Yep. And then the end of the book was on Thanksgiving, an American holiday. So there's all these American type symbology throughout the book, and I think one of the things that that I noticed was, you have the very very hardcore right wing Fourth Reich on Prohibition critic. Right. The typical people you would see on CNN, talking about those type of gun owners. And then you have Richard and Zula, who are not the typical that type of person, where they are very technical and they're very educated, but they know guns and they have guns. And then Peter, who has a tricked out AR-15 in his safe. Yeah. And so these are gun owners, but they're in the technical space. So I think that was one of the, that's kind of a subtle thing, saying you don't have to be, a right wing, no shirt wearing, marry your sister person outside of yeah. to own guns. You can actually be just a normal person starting an MMO, and then just like every American have that right. So obviously, I'm Republican. I'm for guns and stuff like that. So I saw that. I don't know if that's exactly what his intentions were, but it kind of sounded like that kind of subtle message
No, I think you're spot on. And I think even when it comes to Richard's brother, Jake, who is the, as you kind of put it, stereotypical ultra-right-wing, guy, it's interesting because Stephenson, who, as far as I've been able to gather from his novels, is agnostic, really stresses Jake's ultra-fundamentalist religious outlook as well. But he pokes fun at it a little bit, but it's an affectionate poking fun at.
Yeah.
And there's a high level of affection for this character, even though it's clearly somebody who, if they were to meet in real life, Stevenson wouldn't agree with his religious outtake. And I think that he is also trying to contrast, this is our fundamentalist versus the fundamentalists who are flying planes into building, which are often equated in today's news media. And I think he's trying to draw a really sharp distinction and say, look, guys, is this guy crazy? Yeah, but he's a way different type of crazy than Al-Qaeda crazy. So I feel like he's hitting on that as well, too.
Yeah, and in the end, the Americans win.
Right.
Because, the gun owners win.
Yeah.
You had terrorism attacking the home, and the gun owners destroyed the terrorists. I mean, That was pretty obvious.
At the part where all of Jake's also ultra-right-wing neighbors come out to attack the terrorists there at the end, I was thinking, this is like every right-wing gun owner's fantasy is Al-Qaeda just shows up in your backyard. It's wartime! I know at least 2 or 3 people personally in my life who that would be like a dream come true for them to be in that situation. One other theme I thought of as I was reading the book, and I want to run this by you. I looked at this book in some ways as being a spiritual successor to Snow Crash. Okay. So in Snow Crash, obviously this is far more grounded in the real world. Snow Crash has I don't want to call it comical, but kind of almost that comic book, larger than life, very intentionally over the top feel to it in a good way. But Snow Crash, we get this combination of virtual worlds and real life scenarios as well. And it feels like we're kind of revisiting some of the same material, and I really like that. Again, I wish it was more explicit, but I like the idea of, because he was so prophetic in Snow Crash about the development of virtual reality. And even though MMOs aren't VR at this point, I mean, the things he describes in Snow Crash about avatars and currency and the way the metaverse is, it's very much MMO-esque, minus the VR stuff. And there was one moment, I don't know if you caught this, but there was a great meta moment towards the beginning where Richard or the narrator's describing what happens when you start Terrain's map, and it starts out at the globe and kind of spins around and zooms in, and it says Richard stole the idea from Google Earth, because that's how Google Earth starts as well. And then it says, but Richard didn't ever feel guilty about that because he had read long ago that Google Earth ripped that off from an old sci-fi novel. The sci-fi novel in question is Snow Crash, because I don't know if you remember in Snow Crash that the hero, the main character, gets that program at one point for Earth or whatever that lets him have a satellite view of wherever, and that's exactly how it's described. It's in Snow Crash, which I just listened to Snow Crash a month or so ago, so it's fresh in my mind. Yeah. But that was hilarious to me. He never mentioned Snow Crash, but it was a complete jab at Google for stealing his description. It was just a brilliant bit of where I can now have my fictional character steal back from you, and so I love that. That to me was an absolute 2-line throwaway, but an absolute highlight of the book for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's totally awesome.
It's been a few years since I've read Snow Crash, but that's awesome.
If it wasn't so fresh in my mind, I don't think there's a chance I would have gotten it. But I love that. It's such a meta moment. And I'm glad he didn't break the fourth wall or whatever and, write his book into it. But it was, if you're paying attention, you know what he's saying. And I hope somebody who works for Google caught it and felt a little embarrassed.
So he's done some Google talks there. I remember seeing some on YouTube where he's done some talks there. So I wonder if someone that works there will catch that.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So what would you rank this book out of 5? And I already cheated and looked at your Goodreads account, so I know what you're going to say, but for the sake of everyone who hasn't cheated.
Oh, you can link that review down there.
Okay, yeah, I'll put the link to your review in the comments so people can read your full written thoughts. I'm
going to give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
I really liked it. I didn't think it was perfect, but I really enjoyed it. I will say that I think out of all the books that I've read so far, this has the easiest transition into like a miniseries or a movie out of all of them.
Sure.
So I like that aspect of it. It was more of a how do I say it? It was more of like a sci-fi-ish book for every person instead of like a typical sci-fi person.
Yeah, it's a lot more accessible than most of his stuff. Minus the gargantuan size, which is sure to scare more than a few people away.
Yeah, and that was one of the big things that I really knocked it for. There's so many moments where, I like the way that Neal Stephenson does like the info dump.
Yeah.
Where he researches everything to the nth degree, and he'll tell you about, the screws on, a boat or something like that.
Right.
He'll make what they are. It sounds like he's an expert in everything. And I love that. But there are times when he goes into like exposition, and it's just too much. Where he goes too slow. He could have gone and edited about 20% of the book, or maybe not that much, but like 10%, and it would have been a little faster.
Yeah, especially in that middle part. That's where I really noticed it. Maybe the ending a little bit too, but especially though I am glad, because I've kind of knocked him a little bit in the past for his truncated ending, especially in the case of Snow Crash. And this one felt like a more complete ending to me. But yeah, that middle part where we go away from the MMO and it's 200, 250 pages before we see Richard again. Even if he had added like a cameo from Richard somewhere in there, it would have helped the pacing better. Like even if he said, "I don't want to take anything out," okay, make it longer then, which I know is like the last thing his editor probably wants at that point. But we just needed something to say we're not in a completely different book. We're still, these characters who you just spent 250 pages with still matter. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars, though I'll round it up to 4 on Goodreads since they don't let us do half stars. Really, really liked it, but I will say that of the 4 that I've read, this is the one that I've come away with and said, and I don't feel a burning desire to revisit. I very well might, but, I want to read Cryptonomicon again. I can't wait to read Anathema again, or at least listen to it or something. Snow Crash I've now read a couple of times, but yeah, I'll definitely listen or read that one again. This one I might, but I don't feel that same pull to where it's like there's so much more. With those other books, it felt like there's so much in there that I know I didn't get on the first time through. This, even though I'm sure there is more I would get out of it, I just don't feel that same need to go back to it. So 3.5 stars out of 4. Any other thoughts we didn't get to that you wanted to bring up on it about the book, or?
Man, I don't know if I have any other ones. I will say, like, in every book, Stevenson always amazes me.
Oh, he does.
Well, like especially with like the detail that he brings out. Like he'll say things about things. Like in this particular one, he talks about a Makarov gun that the Koloff had.
Yep.
And he talks about how there was a slide holster that Russians would have, and it would sit in the holster, and then you would slide it out, you would take it off the safety, put it around in the chamber, so it was ready to go. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Is that really real? And so I looked it up. On YouTube, there was a guy with that exact holster with the Makarov.
Oh, that's
and I was
awesome.
like, man, this is incredible. It turns out, you can get Makarovs really cheaply and stuff like that. So it makes me think, like, because when he talked about that, I was looking at kind of backtracking behind him, and seeing how now the spider webs, I can see where he kind of, if he was going along the gun trail, I could see where the spider webs took him for the research.
Yeah.
For, the Makarov, and then here, and then here, and then here. So it's kind of, if that's what he was doing, you know. But
that's an interesting way to look at it, to try and dissect what he's getting at thematically. Where do we really see that in-depth research, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that helps your case, that this is a rah-rah America book, you know? Yeah, for me, I just wish it tied together a little bit better. You know? I think that's... I know I've said that a couple times, but that's really just what I keep coming back to as I think about this book, is that there's so much in there. There's part of me that just genuinely wants to say 5 stars, this was awesome, because there's so many great parts in it. Characters are great, the dialogue's great, there's funny parts, you know, everything you would expect from Neal Stephenson, it just doesn't get there as a whole. It's a case where the whole is less than the sum of its parts, unfortunately.
I think I'll also say, like, in the other books that I've read by him, it's like the big idea came at a point where you kind of realize, oh, this is what the book's about,
right?
And it kind of gels everything together. In this book, I didn't really get that. I was waiting for it, and sometimes I'm like, you know, not sure if big idea or just trolling. You know?
Right.
I wasn't really sure, and so I never really got that. And I was especially waiting for more T. Rain. I thought, surely he's going to bring that back, and that's going to be hooked in together, and that never happened. And then that was a big letdown.
Yeah, especially that the REAMDE virus, especially given that that's the title, that turned out to be so meaningless in the book, ultimately. Yeah. And I think, like, you know, it seems like it's going to be this huge deal, an outbreak, and then by the time we come back to it, it's like, well, we got the patch out. Come on! You're going to title your book after that? It's fixed in 5 days by a stupid patch? So I would almost give it a full 4 stars if you just would have chosen a different title. So that was frustrating, but still a good book. I think we both recommend reading it. If you've tried some of Stephenson's other stuff, like Cryptonomicon, and you just found it too inaccessible, this might be a place to start. It's an easy read, despite its length. There's a lot of stuff that it's not gonna break your brain the way Cryptonomicon did, which in my case is a black mark, but if, you know, like we said, if you found Cryptonomicon too impenetrable, you'll probably enjoy this one a little bit more. But Dave, it's fun having you on here. We'll have to find out when we're reading the same book again and do this one more time. Are you going to read the new Dan Simmons next month when it comes out?
I don't know. I haven't read any Dan Simmons. Oh, I'm Dan Simmons. I thought you meant Dan Brown.
Oh, no, gosh.
I was like, at first I was thinking, a Catholic is telling me to read Dan Brown.
Yeah, what about Dan Brown? He's just straight on, you know?
I thought about getting that Dan Simmons book. I still have a couple of Dan Simmons books to read. I have The Terror and Brood on my shelf. I'm really itching to read those. So much so, because I have Ringworld, and it's a fairly short book, comparatively. And I've been wanting to read it, but I keep reading it and, you know, seeing The Terror on my bookshelf. You know? I'm like, I really want to read The Terror. I may just put Ringworld aside and start Dan Simmons book.
That is a great book. That's probably my favorite Dan Simmons, but I won't build it up too much for you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna start reading The Terror.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'll keep an eye on your currently reading on Goodreads, and if it doesn't happen by chance, maybe we'll plan something down the road so we can do this again or whatever. Yeah.
Let me know when you get done with the Diamond Age. Maybe we could start Quicksilver too.
Yeah, there you go. Quicksilver. I was going to read that one next, but I decided, I'll go for something a little shorter. So just the 600-page Neal Stephenson, you know. That's shorter, apparently, according to his standards. Yeah. Whatever. Alrighty. Well, that's all for now, I guess. I'm Ben DiBono.
And I'm Dave Johnson.
And this is the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews. Goodbye.